All right, so you guys are here tonight to learn about CRT, critical race theory, because this is just something that you are going to be hearing about from now until the November 2022 elections. This is the right-wing tactic, or one of the right-wing tactics. I'm going to share screen for a second and just do a little bit of a presentation. So critical race theory, if you don't know what it is, it's an academic concept. I mean, it's old. It started in old, like my age. Like it started back in the late 70s, early 80s. And basically the idea is that race is a social construct, and that racism is really not about like just your racist next door neighbor or your uncle who says horrible things at the dinner table. It's really embedded in our legal systems. And it's an intellectual study around law and history and about how policies have been applied and basically created structural racism. So this is not something that's being taught in kindergarten through 12. Your fifth grader is not studying tort law and how it is applied to, institute structural racism in our country. But that is what the right wing is trying to sell, is that critical race theory is being taught, and they're morphing that into any terminology that has anything to do with race. So diversity, equity, inclusion trainings, anything that talks about, racism in society, they're morphing all of that into this term of critical race theory. I will give you a really great example. Somebody posted, and actually I think in one of our Facebook groups, and I thought it was such a fabulous example of like what structural racism and what critical race theory teaches. So going back to World War II, you have two vets that come home. One is Black and one is white. And the white vet is able to go to college on the GI Bill and get a degree. But Black troops were very often and most likely excluded from GI benefits. So was not able to afford an education and went to work as a laborer. So the white vet was able to buy a home with his education and higher paying job. He was able to get a loan through the through the FHA, which was very inexpensive. The Black vet wasn't eligible for this loan, so he had to rent a house and could only save, so much money. So over the years, of course, this white vet now has equity in his home so he can buy a bigger home. The Black vet had to save up for a very long time to buy a smaller home and buys in a Black business and residential community, segregation. So soon after he buys his home, an interstate highway goes through the downtown, because that is exactly what happened. The interstate highway system, was built through many, many Black neighborhoods. This, of course, is going to cause property values to drop. It's also going to lead to environmental issues, which are dangerous to the children there. So it's very hard to sell your home. So here are two men, 60 years coming home from the war. The Black vet's net worth is 6% of what the white man's was, simply because of government policies, because of GI bills, because of FHA funding, because of decisions made about where to build an interstate highway. So the difference is entirely driven by government policy. Stop sharing for a second. So that's kind of an example of what critical race theory is all about and what they're analyzing. Again, not something that our kindergartners and even high school kids are really engaging in. This is a graduate level, law school level type class that is discussed. So the attack, what is going on with the right wing though, is that this is a coordinated and planned culture war to try to scare suburban voters into voting again for Republican politicians. They're basically taking critical race theory and making it into a boogeyman. And like I said, the goal is to win suburban voters, because they lost the suburban vote. They have been losing it, but 2018, 2020, that vote's been moving away from them. And they're also, the second goal of undermining public education. That's kind of always been a kind of right-wing conservative goal, is to privatize education. And so this is kind of a twofer in that instance. So this is definitely something that is not going away. This is a coordinated effort. It is being funded by Heritage Foundation, is being funded by dark money, by, very well-connected people. And the thing with critical race theory is that nobody really knows what it means. The term is just vague enough that, like I said, they can morph it into anything. They can prevent accurate teaching of history. They can limit what teachers are saying, which is what the legislatures are trying to do. Many of them are passing very broad, very vague bills that's going to be so confusing for teachers and schools trying to decide what they can and cannot say. It's also going to be used to undermine all of this diversity, equity, and inclusion work that so many of our school districts are finally recognizing that they need to do. So all of this is going to be undermined because they can just roll all of that up into this term of critical race theory. And I will say this, the quiet part that they won't say out loud is the right wing knows if our children are able to learn about diversity, learn about equity, learn about the actual history of our country, all the things that we didn't learn about in school. I never learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre. I never learned about redlining. I never learned about any of those things we just talked about, like the GI Bill. You know, if children start to learn some of that really accurate history of our country, it might actually unite them across their differences, and it might bring them together in a way that they actually want to kind of live up to the ideals of our country. And that's not really good for Republican politicians because they won't get the votes then, so there is this, they're not saying the quiet part out loud, is that they want to keep the division. They want to keep, people uneducated about this because it doesn't help their long-term goals in terms of getting elected. Okay, so again, if you have not seen this in your community yet, it is coming, a guarantee. It is going across the country. These right-wing groups have already drafted the legislation. They are just sending it to politicians. In fact, we just got notification today that Tom Cotton, who is a really horrible legislator in the federal government in Congress, is about to introduce legislation to ban any discussion of like race in education. So it's coming from all levels. It will come to your community. Even if you have a more Democratic leaning community, I'm sure some of the more conservative people in your community will be bringing this up, trying to drum up controversy. So there are a couple things that you can do right now, no matter where you live and what you're doing. And I'm going to drop these in the chat and we're going to take a second. We actually created a couple of actions where you can just with one click send a message, an email to your legislators. This would be your local legislators. So whether it's no matter where you live, you can do these. We actually have a very specific one for Ohio because we are based in Ohio, and then also because we actually have legislation pending. So this first message I'm going to drop, this is the national link. So if no matter where you are in the country, you can click this link right now and it will identify your legislators and allow you to send an email to them. The email is already there and already drafted. So all you have to do is just click, click, click and send. If you are an Ohio resident, I am going to drop that link here. Okay, so you guys, please take the time to click on those. It'll literally take you no time at all to do that. And then the other thing that you can do, and share those with your friends. Text that to 5 people right now. Put that on social media. Anything you can do to drum up, getting this in front of our legislators is very important. The other thing you can do is to call your legislators. I know some of you, depending on where you live, some legislatures aren't in session right now, but they probably still have voicemail. They're probably still monitoring their calls. I'm going to actually just show you, a lot of people are intimidated to call their legislators. I'm going to tell you a couple of things. Number one, especially your state legislators, they don't get a lot of phone calls. It's not like your senators and your congressmen who could call it all the time and have stuff. State legislatures tend to not get that many phone calls. So it actually makes a really big impact when you make those phone calls. If it intimidates you to do that, call after hours, like right now, because they're not going to answer. You're going to get voicemail. And if any of you have never gone to your state legislature and watched anything, I highly recommend you do, because you will walk away knowing that you are way smarter than a lot of the people who are elected and sitting there and running your state. I was shocked the first time I went. All right, this is my state representative. I'm just going to call and leave a message so you guys can kind of hear what it sounds like and how easy it is. Sorry.
Hi, you've reached the office of State Representative Paul Zellweger. We are not available at the moment, but if you could leave your name, number, and a detailed message, we can get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks. Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
Hi, my name is Julie Womack. I'm a constituent. My address is 6854 Roberts Park Drive, Mason, Ohio, 45040. I'm calling to say that I adamantly oppose the bills HB 322 and HB 327 that are called divisive concepts and are fighting against critical race theory. I believe in an honest education for my children, and I oppose these bills. Okay, that's it. And I had actual bills to talk about, but you could just say, call and say, I oppose, any attempts to limit discussions of race in school. Even if there's no bills pending, you can just leave a message. You can leave your phone number. You don't have to leave your address. You can do whatever you really want to do, but they do count those. When people come in, they will count like how many calls they're getting about something. So it's really easy and really important to make those phone calls. I know people who call every day to talk about different things that are going on. So, but especially when you see these things creeping into your community or you start hearing information, it's definitely important to reach out to your legislatures. You can also email your city council, your school board, any level of official. It's really important to reach out to them. I would like to now kind of give you a feel for what could happen in your communities. I'm really happy to have two women here tonight who are both dealing with this issue. And I mean, really dealing, it's like a hotbed issue in their communities right now. I'm going to start with Misty. Thank you very much, Sarah, for bringing Misty up. Misty is up in Bay Village, which is actually my hometown. It's on the west side of Cleveland. So Misty, just tell us what you guys have been facing with your school board and within your school district.
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Julie. Definitely appreciate everything that Red, White, and Blue is doing on this topic. I see a couple of fellow Bay Villagers on this call, so I'm happy about that too. So in Bay Village, I think we kind of knew this was coming, partly because last year after George Floyd was murdered, the Board of Education had passed an equity resolution, and our city council had done something similar. And so the discussion was already out there around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since then, the Board of Education in Bay Village, along with our superintendent, had put together, the start of a strategic planning effort. And so diversity, equity, and inclusion was very deeply involved in that plan. And so now, all of a sudden, when Tucker Carlson starts talking about CRT and what that means, that this is, infiltrating our schools and teachers are indoctrinating our children, we kind of had a feeling that this was coming to Bay Village, especially because they're positioning CRT as code words for CRT being diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And members of our school district, went through like a voluntary DEI training program. Some teachers volunteered their time to do this. This is not mandated by the schools. And there were some posts like in March, celebrating that some of these teachers had received these certificates. So that kind of armed people with even more information to say, this is happening in Bay Village. And so many of these people who were against CRT started showing up at our board meetings. And so our group, we've got a pretty big activist group in Bay Village called the Bay Village Nasty Women. Pretty proud of some of the work that we've done. We've got a group of nearly 700 people, mostly located in Bay Village and in the region. And so when this topic came up, it's just so close to home. So we knew we wanted to be a part of it and make sure that we were part of the conversation and witness to what some of these people were saying in these meetings. Some of the statements that are made are blatantly racist and really disappointing. Some of the questions that they were asking the board had to do with this equity audit that the board had initiated with a consultant who happens to be a Black woman. And of course, they were sort of saying that because she's a Black woman, she has a biased opinion and all these things that are, obviously just people are showing their racism like front and center. And so some of what we were doing to counter those voices, is to make sure that we were voicing our support of what the district was doing. We supported the equity commitment that the board had signed last year. We support the direction that the school district is heading in terms of, the strategic plan and the DEI committees. And we just keep showing up because these people keep showing up. And what's really scary about this other group is that they're very organized, because what Julie mentioned, there are these outside agitators, Ohio Protect Children, which is a coalition that's formed by Ohio Value Voters along with the Heritage Foundation. They have put together talking points and really glossy brochures that arm people with the information that they need to feel prepared to go in front of a school board and question the school board what they're doing. They have a lot of questions about curriculum. They're pulling a lot of FOIA requests in the district to get information on exactly what our teachers are teaching. They're wanting to see emails between the teachers and the social studies department, and it's really something else, But they will tell in these brochures, they say common code names for CRT include diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So they go in thinking those code words mean that it's happening. And for whatever reason, even though the board keeps saying we are not teaching CRT in our school district, it just keeps going. And we keep showing up because it's important to make sure that our voices are heard, because we do really believe that we are the quiet minority, or quiet majority, and they are the loud minority. But until we keep, showing up, their long game is to unseat members of our board. We have elections coming up. Local elections are really important, and so we need to make sure that we are putting candidates that we support front and center, make sure that they get elected, because there are some interesting people who have already filed to run in our district, and that's really what's scary. So.
Are you guys doing a lot of coordinating online? Is that how you guys are doing your side of it, just for people who might want to organize in their own communities, whether support candidates or just to show up in a meeting? Like it's you got to organize to even show up. So.
Yeah, for sure. So we organize online in our Facebook group, but we also just had an in-person meeting over the weekend. One of the local churches gave us space, which was really great of a church to do. But in that meeting, Julie, we used a lot of the information that Red, Wine, and Blue put together in terms of talking points, making sure that we had an action plan, not only to call our state legislators around these bills, HB 322 and 327, which are definitely like a big threat, but also to make sure that we had talking points going into the next board meeting, which was this past Monday, just to make sure that we have speakers prepared with written statements to go up and speak to the board to counter some of those negative voices. And that's what we've been doing, just to make sure that we are prepared, that we have speakers, we have student speakers, teacher speakers, parents and community members speaking, retired teachers, and we've come up with some really great statements. And so it's nice to kind of balance it out so the board isn't just hearing one side of the argument here.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think that hopefully that answers people who might be thinking like, what can we do or how do we do this in our community? So not only like Misty's saying, is it important to like be in communication with other parents, and whether it's Facebook or in-person meetings, there are additional steps people can take, like calling legislators or having those open lines of communication, or you could even step up and run for office yourself. So I'm going to bring Andrea up, or I'm going to ask Sarah to bring Andrea up here to join the conversation. Okay. Hi, Andrea. I think I got dropped off, Sarah, if you want to, there I am. Let's see. So Andrea lives near me in Cincinnati. And she is also facing this in her district, and they are definitely immersed in a fight over this. And Andrea is actually stepped up to run for school board. So I would love for her to talk a little bit about what is going on in her community, what motivated her to run, how she feels about all that. And she's actually taken the step of talking to her federal congressman today, or at least his office. So.
Yeah, thank you. The parallels between what Misty was saying and what is happening here at the opposite end of the state is just uncanny. So also, kind of post George Floyd's murder, our district changed a racist mascot. It was the Redskin Indian. And that was kind of our district's, response that came out of that. They already had a diversity and inclusion policy. And in response to some student suicides, they had a staff training program that was called the CARE team. And so as we came into this year, as soon as I started hearing rumblings about critical race theory in other areas, it immediately came to our district and questions started to be asked. And then, like Misty shared too, when they started saying, talking about inclusion means critical race theory. So the last 2 school board meetings had fairly visible protests. At the first one, we organized a group of parents who spoke in support of the work that the district had done. And the second one, the tact was more, let's not even give their argument the breathing space, and a group of women, parents, I guess I should say, they started a book drive to actually donate books back into the district. So they did something that was productive and positive, kind of right next to that anti-CRT protest that was taking place. So as Julie mentioned, there are 2 House bills, in our state, as I know that there are in other states as well. And the day before our last board meeting where this protest was planned, Congressman Winstrup sent out an email that stated that there were confirmed schools in Ohio that were teaching critical race theory, which is not true. And he threatened to pull funding from any district that taught critical race theory the day before this board meeting. So a friend of mine called up his office and said she wanted a meeting and she invited me to come. So, there are all these different levels of advocacy that you can do. Folks who knew me pre-2016 would not recognize who I am today, starting with just, a little bit of engagement and involvement with, calling legislators or writing them first. Honestly, the last time I met with Red, Wine, and Blue is when I made my first calls right to legislators. I was a person that was intimidated by that. I actually work in education, so the thought of running for school board had crossed my mind. But all of this just really kind of pushed me and made me energized to get involved and to step up and say, somebody needs to really stand up for our kids and, in support of folks learning about diversity and inclusion, because that's ultimately what's going to make our students' education the best it can be. So.
That's great. No, I think it's fabulous. I mean, there are so many different ways. If you've never done anything, I'm new to this too. Like I really got involved after 2016. And you can start at so many levels, whether it's just calling your legislator and leaving a voicemail or talking to the staff person. You're going to talk to staff people. You're not really ever going to talk to your legislator. So that kind of things can be easy. Sending that email, like I just put in the chat, that is one way to get involved. Find your local community group, find the grassroots groups in your community, reach out to a Dem club. Even if you're not a Dem, you might be able to find like a grassroots group that is like a bipartisan group or a progressive group or something to get involved. And I will be 100% honest. Like, I really think a lot of times women have a problem with stepping up. They feel like they're not qualified. They feel like, oh, I'm I don't know if there's someone better than me to do this. There's nobody better than you to do this. If you care about what's going on in your community and you care about whether it's school board or city council or county commissioner, whatever it may be, if you care about your community, you are qualified. And I think that's something that holds people back. So I'm super proud of Andrea. I met her several years ago when she was just getting started on this. So I'm so proud that she's running for school board, and there's been so many amazing women stepping up. How has it been campaigning so far?
Gosh, it's been a whirlwind. It's been talk about, thinking that you're not good enough. I tell you what, kind of feel that question within myself every day, you know, thinking, can I really do this? There are actually 4 out of 5 seats on our school board that are up for election this year, which is why it's, I think, getting a lot of heat of attention. And the 2 ladies that I am kind of partnering with, that we were all endorsed by Democratic candidates, they both have doctorates. And so it's like, oh my gosh. But you can, you know, you just have to, you speak to your story, you know, and take baby steps, I think, too. The other thing, Julie, that we haven't talked about, and this is really where I did even get motivated to get more involved, was be involved in my last school board race. I'm sure there's a lot of places with school board races coming up. I think even through COVID, we learned how important our school boards are. So please, if nothing else, be very mindful of who's up for re-election and what's going on and who's running. And that would be another great way to get involved. A lot of those races are nonpartisan too. So you could connect up there.
No, that's a fabulous suggestion. Like even being involved in a campaign, because number one, I'm sure campaigns are always desperate for help, right? You need volunteers to help you. So there's so many different things you can do on a campaign. You can find what suits your comfort level, and you might actually grow into wanting to do something else. You know, you might be okay to make a phone call, but don't want to knock a door. You might be okay with like postcard, you know, you'll find your jam on a campaign. But you're right, Andrea, that's a great suggestion as a way to get involved and to see up close and personal how it does. Misty actually ran a successful campaign for a woman who ran for state house here in Ohio. So she stepped up and did that for the first time. So I will just say again, like, if you have any doubts about your abilities, go watch a state legislative meeting. The first time I did, my jaw literally hit the floor. I could not believe some of the things coming out, especially of the men's mouths, and how little they understood about the bills that were in front of them, and the questions they were asking people were just illogical. So it was quite shocking, and I think you'll walk away feeling like Einstein. So I suggest you guys all check that out at some point. All right, thank you, Andrea. I'm going to try to wrap up because I know it's about a half hour. So the last thing I like to go over is just talking points for everybody. I think this is something that is very helpful. We put together some things that you can say in conversations or online to counter some of these things. And let me share those real quick. Back to share my screen. So number one, debunk the premise. So, I mean, they're going to come in and say, we're trying to indoctrinate our kids, that our kids are being taught to hate their country. You just like take that head on and say, what's the problem? Of course, that's not what we want. Of course, we love our country. In fact, what this is really about is, we want to have an honest education so our kids can, we can heal our country's divisions. Patriotism. I love taking the flag and wrapping ourselves in the flag, because the right wing really likes to think that is only theirs to own. So, no, this isn't about that. We love our country. We always, as this country, have found a way to do hard things, and learning about our country's histories and their struggles is how we create a more perfect union, how we live up to those ideals. Or also just, we want to prepare our kids for the 21st century. This is what we're all about. We want an honest and accurate education because we want our kids to learn. Again, debunking the indoctrination argument that learning is freedom. Learning different viewpoints is a sign of a free mind, and politicians deciding what our kids can and cannot learn is actually indoctrination. I really love that point. It's turning it back. It's like, we trust our teachers, we trust different viewpoints, but the politicians deciding what my kid can learn, that's indoctrination. And then again, for like kind of another way to call it out is just to say, this is a play to win back mainstream suburban women. This is a ploy by the right wing to get our votes. How dumb do you think we are? We see right through what you're trying to do here. We are not the 1950s housewife. We are not afraid about our kids learning true history. Basically, everything they're trying to sell is like, parents don't want this. Parents don't want their kids to learn this. Yes, we do. This is important to us. Please stop pretending, that this is anything more than a political tactic. And then just the whole thing, we got rid of Trump, we beat Trump, we beat Trumpification of our kids' education. And now we're going to beat this. It's exhausting, but we're not backing down. We know better. These are some of the talking points that I think you could use in front of school board. You could use if you're talking to other parents. You could use, to share with other people if you're organizing around this. And so the things that I ask you to do is monitor discussions. So if you have a public Facebook page, like I do in my community, like whatever city you live in, the public group Facebook page, just kind of monitor, like watch the conversations, because this will start popping up on there. People will start discussing it. It's kind of a hint that it's coming. Look at the letters to the editors in your local paper, because people will start writing about this. This is something the right wing will ask them to do, to kind of start planting those seeds. If you see new Facebook groups forming, like maybe you get invited to the Moms for Liberty, that is a group that is forming, to try to push this critical race theory issue. Watch your school board agendas, see what's on the agenda, make sure you know what's coming up. If you have contacts on the school board or friendly people, get in there and figure out what they're talking about in executive session. Because if you aren't prepared for it, it's just going to happen and you're not even going to know. Some of these school districts are literally, my city council is doing this, meeting an executive session and then throwing things on agendas, and you don't even have time to prepare. So you really got to be on top of it and pay attention. And again, call, email your legislator, your legislators on all level, tweet at them if they're on Twitter. That's a great way. If you're a Twitter person, tweet at them about this. Just keep up that pressure that you are watching and you are paying attention. And then Red, Wine, and Blue we're going to be focused on this all the way through November 2022 and maybe into 24, depending on how this gets drawn out. We've already created content. We've got several videos about critical race theory that you can share online. You can send to people. We are going to keep making new content on this. In fact, we were up trying to highlight some of the things going on with Misty and her group, and recording women showing up. And the notion is that there's these enraged parents at the school board, but we want to show the normal parents who are just there standing up for their kids, and to show that it's not all these enraged parents who are upset about critical race theory. So we will be creating content and pushing back on that. We will also have more email actions. We will keep having things going on. So just keep sharing those and paying attention. And that is my overview.